Okay, in this video we're going to open up by asking people to kindly donate to my Patreon. That's patreon.com/challengehistory. Donations start at $1 a month, go up to groups of $100 a month. At the $50 and $100 a month, there's a Roman gold coin giveaway. Once we reach a threshold of a few people, it'll start in a year. And then at the $100 level, there's going to be a giveaway of a Byzantine gold coin giveaway as well for a few, once we reach a level of a few people a year. And I'm going to enter the video now with it. And in this video, we're going to go over Joe Biden's candidacy and explain it from an actual aspect of liberty, as opposed to going over other things. And we're just going to go over his whole platform. But first, with it, what I'd like to do is actually make a point that's comparing the actual way that he's running advertisements as opposed to Trump. This is one of the things in which I'd like to state that he has actually run a positive thing, because comparing it with it, him and Joe Jorgensen are actually running the way they're portraying their campaign is through a positive light and not through a negative light, as opposed to Donald Trump, who's basically showing, if you do not elect me, it's going to be gloom and doom. And this, almost as mudslinging as a type of thing of a threat of, if you do not vote for me, X is going to happen. As he is this ultimate barrier. Now, if we actually believe in the actual Constitution and the other branches being able to hold it up and it being able to be led from a local level, that this should never be an actual issue. The president should not be an imperial position anyhow. And if he would have actually done his job and actually decentralized the actual position, this would never have actually been an issue. He could have actually worked through everything and actually decentralized the position and worked through everything to actually slow the actual control of the executive. But he didn't do that. He was pushing for more power to the executive, just like just like many presidents before him. And this all started with the push with the progressive movement with Teddy Roosevelt. And the fact is it's been accelerating ever faster. And that's something that basically that Trump could have stopped, and he could have gone in the opposite direction and decentralized it. One of the benefits in my current state of Wisconsin is, before leaving office, is the previous Governor Walker, actually decentralized the office of governor. And that was something very, very good. He put it in the hands of the legislature and the people. And this is something that was actually a huge benefit, because he was saying, I trust the people, and I do not trust one person to actually control the people. And it's actually shown to be beneficial in many cases. Now, because of the coronavirus, we still have the ability for these governors to be able to do these unconstitutional actions, because the judges are kind of turning a blind eye to it and allowing them to do things that are clearly unconstitutional. But this is what has happened now. Trump could have actually done this. Now, on to the Biden stuff with it, is that the first benefit I see with him is that he's not actually offering this gloom and doom type of vision of, if you don't vote for me, the whole world's coming to an end. He's not exactly coming with this whole thing. Now, on to his ideas. Now, first of all, is he wants to Build Back Better. Now, his jobs and economic recovery plan. Now, the problem being with this is that he thinks he can do it from the actual government. The problem being is that government can't create jobs. It can only it can all the only thing it can do is actually hinder jobs, and that's the only thing it does. This is one thing that he lacks knowledge on, and I think it's because he comes purely from the political world, and he's been, I don't know if it's because he's been taught that through a lot of this New Deal garbage that's of that, but frankly, government doesn't create jobs. It never has. The way government would actually create jobs is you pay one person to dig a hole, you pay another person to fill it back in, and you pay another person uh, to actually monitor them as management to watch them dig the hole and fill it back in, instead of leaving the all that money in the private sector to them to actually do actual activities that would actually be productive to the marketplace and let the marketplace decide where the money should actually be going and where the marketplace actually sees best fit. And this is what needs to happen. We actually need to cut all this bloat out. Um, he says advancing racial equality across the American economy. Basically, the economically with it is basically is all we need to do is get rid of a lot of the barriers that are actually for work. That's all we have to do. Now, he's wants to put a lot of money into this. You don't actually have to put money into any of this. Now, this is another problem that we see with him. He wants to put a lot of money into it and promote leadership in all agencies, and uh, which is problems there with it. He doesn't want to support second chances for economic success, which is actually a positive thing. This is basically judicial reform. This is something that's been pushed uh, by the Libertarian Party for quite some time. What that's a positive with, but he also wants to do infrastructure and clean energy investments. Government should not be putting money into this. Government should actually be currently taking money out of all subsidies, and this is what has caused problems in what has raised the cost of energy for the average family, which is actually hurting the minorities specifically. And if he wants to actually help them out, it's to remove subsidies from both clean energy and subsidies from fossil fuels. If you remove subsidies from these both, as well as subsidies from different things like sugar and other things like that, you'll notice that it'll actually be a lot more affordable for these families to actually live. You won't need to be providing all these other things to actually offset what you've actually created in corporate welfare, and you can actually start cutting those programs. And he says strengthening the Federal Reserve's focus on racial economic gaps. The Federal Reserve has been has been the actual problem in this to begin with. The Federal Reserve can't create anything. The Federal Reserve, frankly, needs to be ended. This is something, and we need to go to an actual precious metal currency as the Constitution states. This is something where he gets wrong as well, and he needs to understand this as well. That he doesn't understand that they've actually been the problem why there's been this whole issue. If we're going to fix anything with that, it's going to have to end. The Federal Reserve needs to end. We cannot do this anymore because they've been the actual guilty party in what has caused it. The Federal Reserve is not an actual benefit; it's actually a harmful thing. And what they do is they monetize the actual debt, and what they're doing is they're just creating inflation. So the people at the bottom of the list, meaning minorities, in many cases, minorities and poorer whites, that they're basically the ones who are getting shafted in the whole thing. Those who can work their way up to the top, which is the wealthiest, which is sometimes minorities who can work their way up there, uh, they're the ones who end up getting the biggest benefit. Um, and it says build 21st century care infrastructure. Well, the fact is the biggest problem with this is that the reason why our infrastructure on our medical infrastructure is so bad is mainly because we have a bunch of regulations and stopgaps in between that basically prevent, such as preventing hospitals from being built. If there's a hospital too close, and these other things like this that basically where it's a lot of protectionism that has actually been worked in, and it's been done by both parties. And specifically because it's about protecting the economic success of these hospitals instead of allowing competition, and it's being done by at both local levels and national levels, and instead of actually promoting uh, full out capitalism, it's this mixed economy idea. And it's he still has this idea that we can actually go with this mixed economy and work with the ability to uh, have the ability to help people out, and the fact is we can't. Um, he also wants to create for a 21st century caregiving and education workforce. Frankly, with it, government needs to get out of both. They need to get out of the medical system and they need to get out of education. This is actually what's caused both to slide massively. There's a reason why our medical system is so expensive is because of the government getting involved. And when they've done this, this has caused it to be massively expensive. And they've also, and yes, caregiving is part of the medical uh, procedures and stuff. Uh, even though he's adding in childcare as well with it, but there's other types of caregivers as well. Uh, and then education as well. Education is become so expensive in this country and so poor because the government has gotten involved at every level. Does it? The government doesn't need to get involved, and in many cases, we have government education trying to block any type of competition. Even if the competition, specifically, I mean, we're seeing even trying to block not-for-profit charter schools. And the fact is, I mean, they're trying to block them specifically because these public schools find them as troubling because they know they can't compete. And every time they want to compare charter schools, they go, oh, what we're going to do is we're going to compare charter schools in the worst possible areas to the what it called to the best public schools in the nation. Well, the fact is you can't. And this is where they try to get the argument against charter schools. And you can't do it. You have to compare charter schools to their actual district. You compare charter schools to their actual district, they always outperform the ones in their actual district every single time. Charter schools and private schools always outperform. And what we need to do is get government out of the way. And if we just had charter schools and private schools, we wouldn't have to worry about this whole problem. And specifically, I think we should actually go with distance learning without the teacher having to be a babysitter, even remotely, and we could actually help this thing out and all of this stuff because we can make education far cheaper and get rid of the poor quality teachers then. And if we start raising our infrastructure to get these students the equipment that they need to actually learn, we can actually make our education far superior. and he's going to build a modern, sustainable infrastructure and equitable, clean energy future. I hate to tell him with this, but he wants his net zero emissions system by 20 by no later than 2050. We're going to have to, number one, eliminate all types of regulations that prevent using specific types of energy. Number one. Number two, he's going to have to eliminate all subsidies. This is not going to happen. Otherwise, with it, he wants to actually create this whole thing of basically putting us on these forms of energy that are highly expensive and that do not produce at an efficient rate. Now, instead, we could actually be using nuclear energy, which does not produce emissions and only produces its things that it gives off is hot water, and we can actually do things like that without impacting the actual world. Now, infrastructure, he wants to he thinks he can create jobs rebuilding the infrastructure. Frankly, with it, what we need to do is reduce the taxation and let the local areas actually pay for it or pay for it in a private basis. Because the fact is companies within certain areas know that if the roads and other things like that are actually rebuilt, we can actually do this anyway. And he needs to understand that these roads require petroleum anyway, so we can't exactly fully eliminate petroleum as is anyway. The auto industry, he says he wants to create 1 million new jobs and all these other things like that. Frankly, guess what? This is not going to happen. You cannot force auto industry jobs and all these other things like this, and do electric vehicle charging stations and parts and materials and all that stuff. And what it called try to force people to join the auto workers union. Guess what? You're not going to be able to force that. Not many people would have an interest in that. If there's no interest in it, you can't force people because people are just not going to have the interest in it. If there's no interest in it, you can't force it, because we become where there's more robots making vehicles, we just don't have it, and we don't have and there aren't enough need for vehicles being able to be made. That means our vehicle production would have to be made tenfold to would actually be made 11-fold actually to create 1 million new jobs. That's impossible to do that in the auto industry, because the fact is, through automation, through actual stuff of through creating these parts with it, the only reason why we've actually lost jobs in the auto industry is not through actual cars being made overseas, but rather because the fact is that the actual the actual cars themselves do not require as much human assembly. They're assembled by robots. I mean, this is what's actually happened in the auto industry. And if they want to blame anything, they can on the lack of human assembly. They can blame their own unions, because the unions have actually raised their wages so high that it's actually become unprofitable to actually assemble cars with humans doing them themselves, so they can't hire as many people. And they've also and unions keep people out of actually getting jobs anyhow, and this is the whole point. So to actually say you want to create 1 million new jobs, this is impossible. Transit, he wants to actually add more zero emission public transportation options. The problem being is this is not going to, and he wants more union jobs. This is going to actually cause more. This is going to cause more issues with the actual with people actually being able to get the with cities being able to function, because it's going to cause their actual budgets to rise. And you can keep pumping out money, but the fact is, it's not going to happen. Power sector. He wants to actually get carbon pollution free power sector by 2035. This is very easy. You can do this very easy by just eliminating the barriers to nuclear energy. That's all you have to do. Nuclear energy creates a smaller footprint than coal-powered power plants, and they generate far more energy. It creates very, very high-paying jobs. You don't have to have a union for this, and like he's suggesting, and it's going to yes, it does create a need for higher education, but it creates these jobs that are very, very high paying, and the actual so-called waste is actually both, number one, it's hot water. That's what comes out because it's usage of water. And number two, the other waste is either A, recycled, that's a nuclear material, or B, it's used in nuclear medicine. This is something in which we can actually use. Buildings, he wants to what it calls upgrade buildings in the area. This is buildings and housing, and he wants to cause innovation, uh, agriculture and conservation. He wants what a climate smart agriculture and conservation, environment, and so-called environmental justice, whatever that means. And the fact is that's been what it called. We've seen that is such an ambiguous term that's basically is that it's just been a kind of a little bit of a buzzword, and he has a lot of these things that are basically just spending a great deal more money. Um, he's doing basically saying to ensure the future is made by all of America, by all of America's workers. This is basically just saying that he wants more American made products, but the fact is we're a consumer nation, and it's going to basically say that uh, and it's basically saying that it's basically he wants to push this buy American stuff with it and all this other stuff like that. So he wants to push a lot more money into companies, which is essentially all you're going to be doing is you're going to basically be pushing up the price of goods, and this is going to hurt people. He's creating obviously his roadmap to opening up schools with it, but frankly, if we actually look at he needs to look up the data first, and he needs to show that that compared to the 2018 flu, the it actually shows that COVID is actually about two-thirds of what the death rate of the 2018 flu. Why do we not have the actual cases on the 2018 flu for exact cases? Because they just don't follow those. He wants, in his case, with it, he wants to do testing and tracing. This would tracing with it is not likely to go through with it because it's probably going to be considered a violation of the Fourth Amendment. Um, um, he's basically saying he wants to provide small businesses with the resources they need to open safely. All they have to do is just basically is allow them to make their own decisions. Provide older Americans and others higher, protect older Americans and others high at risk. Basically, there's nothing. Uh, Establish a supply chain for PPE, fully utilize the Defense Production Act. Basically, all he's doing, Defense Production Act basically means where they can essentially hoard all of the word stuff from companies and take them out of the normal supply chain, and that's basically what it does. That the Defense Production Act should actually be repealed because essentially it's what actually caused the problem that we see today. The but when Donald Trump used the Defense Production Act on it, it actually caused hoarding by the government of actual materials that were actually necessary for for these places like hospitals, schools, and other places from actually getting the actual materials, as well as regular people from actually getting these materials that they needed. And if he would have let the actual economy run as is, he wouldn't have had this problem. But when he engaged the Defense Production Act essentially allowed the military to essentially hoard these materials and decide who gets them and who does not, and when these things are sent out. And it was just basically a essentially a Marxist centralization of all these things. And he also wants to do testing with it. And frankly, with it is this is not going to work because the fact is we've seen that with the inaccuracies amongst testing, and even on the reporting of testing, we've seen many of these testing kits are already linked to basically being tainted. In many of these shipments, as high as 60% of them. Uh, he said he wants to set national safety guidelines to power local decision making. Well, that's counterproductive. You do one of what they need to of what they would do to open, or B, you empower local decision making. You don't do both. That's what that is and he's saying he doesn't want mixed messages or political ultimatums. That is exactly what that is, and he wants to base it off the Centers for Disease Control. Problem being is the Centers for Disease Control in the United States has been actually schizophrenic with what they've actually stated. This is the actual point. They've actually have not had a clear and concise statement, and they can change week to week. And so the problem being with that is that has never been any there's never been uh, any type of concise statements on this. And what he gets wrong with this is, in many cases, your local doctors within each of these jurisdictions where these teachers may teach, pretty much you will have a unanimous consent in which or near unanimous consent to where doctors do not trust the decision of the CDC. The CDC has been considered to be a joke for for quite some time, and it really many doctors do not follow their guidelines because they do not trust them. Um, he wants to still put more funding with this. I mean, in this for what it calls for reconfiguring classrooms, kitchens, and other spaces, improve ventilation, blah 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 blah. Basically, what they need to do is bring on for basically for moving up to virtual classrooms and try to empower homeschooling. He needs to eliminate the idea of public schooling in the near future. This is what he should be doing. This will actually aid things. And he needs to essentially get teachers away from public schools and start decentralizing people from this. And he wants to provide emergency funding for public schools and child care providers. So that this essentially is going against the things that would actually help everything out. And this is another thing. This is a massive problem that I find with him. Um, and healthcare access and inequalities help women navigate work and families and violence against women and protect women around the world. Frankly, with it is what he needs to do is to say is the best thing government could do is stay out of it. Basically, frankly, with it is women have equal rights under the law. We already currently have this. The problem being is when government gets involved, they make things worse. And this is where we've actually had this. Biden's plan for full participation and equality for people with disabilities. The problem being is government doesn't even follow their own guidelines. I personally have been discriminated with disabilities against with the actual State Department. Yet the State Department says they followed their own guidelines, and yet when it comes down to it, is when we look at the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act, it doesn't matter with it. It doesn't even have any teeth. When we're talking with this, it's a bunch of garbage. It doesn't matter with it. There is no disability rights when it comes down to it, because companies and everybody else can weasel their way out of it. Especially the government. The government will always weasel their way out of it because they'll always make an excuse, and they'll make an excuse for that government agency, and they'll basically say business. That's uh, again, same thing. Joe's 4-point plan for our essential workers. Hate to tell people this. There is no such thing as an essential worker, because the fact is they can basically decide who is and who isn't at any time. And because the fact is what is essential with it. Because the fact is the market should determine what's essential and what's not. And the fact is when we have government intervening with it, they're going to say, "Oh, but these useless people are essential." Why do we have? Why are people in the media going to work and spreading garbage when they have no complete usage whatsoever? And they've essentially, and I'm not talking about one side or the other with it. I'm saying in general, are they? In my opinion, they're not even essential whatsoever. Anything you need with it, you can actually get. You can actually get everything on your phone. Doesn't matter if we're talking local media or national media. You can get on your phone with it. We don't need any one of them spouting off their garbage. The Biden plan to scale up employment insurance. We don't need employment insurance. This is basically our problem that we have right here in this country, is that right now we have so much inflation going on because of intervention that we have people living week to week. We wouldn't need employment insurance, which is actually causing the price to actually do business, because your business because the employers have to actually pay for this, and it actually causes they basically slap. That's another thing to slap on for uh, the cost of business, and what ends up being going into the employee's taxation. So you're paying for your own thing as well. With it, you're not really. It's not really something that's going down into something that's helping you out. You're essentially losing your money. They're stealing your money to pay for this garbage. Biden plan for bankruptcy reform. Frankly, with it, we need to understand why we've had it with it, and why we've had bankruptcy. This is because of we've had so much government. Um, Biden's plans for combating COVID-19. Basically, he stated this is something which is a bad idea, because we've already gone over it, and he wants uh, free testing and all these other garbage things. And but the fact is when it comes down to that mask mandate, we know it doesn't work, because the fact is if we look at areas with mask mandates, they've actually produced higher numbers in COVID cases, and we can actually look at that, and we can see that that's actually been a problem. They've actually seen different things with improper washing of uh, these masks that are not disposable, and those have actually led to a bunch of different other types of viral infections, and viral and bacterial infections, I should say. Literary voice Biden's plans for Black America. Now, the fact is, with it, we need to essentially he's talking about high levels of air pollution and garbage like that. Help. It says African Americans have been hit hard. Over 90% of Black Americans have been shut down and out of the initial relief program due to pre-existing systematic disparities in lending. Well, the fact is what we need to do is get government out of our system with it. And frankly, the best thing that people can do to do that with it is frankly stop rioting. You're destroying your actual communities. When you firebomb a business with it, you're probably firebombing a black business. Biden's plan for Central America, frankly, um, let's see on this one. I'll give. He wants to what do you call it, pump money into the region. So I don't agree with that. But what do you call it? But his idea of but he should basically allow free investment even into uh, these Marxist countries as well. The only way to end corruption is to essentially essentially allow them to make their decisions. That's the only way that they're going to end their own corruption. With it. These things need to be made by their own people. Immigration. Now, here's the thing with it: is it is basically he wants to get immigrants back in. He wants to actually get them out of the actual. He wants to actually get them uh, back onto the grid after being off the grid system with it, which is actually going to help the actual economy because there's actually benefits to it. He wants to get rid of the wall and as well as get rid of the different travel bans, which is going to start bringing people back in here, normalizing the immigration process. Now, this is going to actually help people as well with it. Now, people are going to be asking, how does this actually help the regular worker? Well, what's going to happen with the regular worker with something like this is the fact is what it's going to do is what it will be doing is we will actually veterans, and I don't think he's talking about this because he has voted for a lot of war. This is one of the negatives on him. And the fact is the best thing you could ever do for our veterans is bring all our people home and end the wars. Because the fact is we need to essentially uh, make the thing and make sure that what's happening is that and he wants professional and economic opportunities. He's doing these, and frankly, we need to stop these things by Spencer encouraging unions and empowering workers. We don't need to essentially be engaging in the labor force and forcing people into these things. This is another bad idea. Biden's plans for campaign financing government reform. Frankly, with it is what they need to do is, frankly, is eliminate all the barriers and let basically people put their money where they want. The people out there are not going to be swayed by a garbage ad. As I've stated before, when we look at the actual numbers on the 2016 campaign, Trump put up far less when it came down to it, and uh, it was. This is something in which we need to view that. Now he has a plan for, and we saw that he did not have the numbers in. He did not have the numbers in the financial end with it, but was still able to win the election. This is basically because he was able to get a message out and shown that you don't necessarily need more money in the thing. So basically, so people can pump as much money as they want, and it still has no impact. People are going to make the decisions that they want to make. Biden's plans for education beyond high school with it. Basically, the best thing he can do is advise people to get more education. Tell them that they don't, tell them to work hard. That's all he can do. Stop pumping money into it. This is what has made our education system weak. And what he's doing is and he needs to stop he can basically say, we're going to eliminate the racial barriers for the decision making in colleges, because the best equalizer is in education. He wants to do stuff against what he called gun violence. Even though when we look at the actual numbers of gun violence, it is far down. This is something which is the silliest damn thing, and I don't think and luckily it's not going to pass. He wants to do all these other things, and basically that frankly are not unconstitutional, and bring them right back. And when we look at the actual numbers of some of these acts that he wants to put through, they're basically equal to what we had in the 1990s. And if we look at the history of the United States, we know anybody that actually studies the amount of violence with it, the most violent decade in the history of the United States, including the era during the Civil War, is the 1990s. This was directly due to the war on drugs and due to severe gun control. Biden's plans for violence against women, that's kind of silly. Biden's plans for criminal justice reform. This is something in which we need to essentially, he says we must reduce the amount of people incarcerated in this country and while also reducing crime. That's a good thing to do. And basically what he can do is, best thing you can do with that, end the war on drugs. We don't need any grants for this. It does not take much. We don't need funding for mental and substance abuse disorders with it. It's very easy. End the war on drugs, in which I'm so far not seeing that, and that's probably due to his eliminate mandatory minimums. Now this is allowing the actual judges to make their own decisions. This is one that's a big thing. End once and for all the federal crack and powder cocaine disparity. This is something in which was actually proposed by former First Lady Hillary Clinton for actually doing. She referred to black people as super predators, and this is how this thing actually came about. Decriminalize the use of cannabis and automatically expunge all prior cannabis use convictions, and all incarceration for drug use alone, and instead divert individuals for drug courts and treatment. There should be no drug courts. Just basically and the actual expand other effective alternatives to detention, eliminate the death penalty. Now, the problem being with that is you're going over states' rights. Now, I'm not saying that I don't agree with that. I'm just stating that you're going to have a little bit of problem because we have states' rights. Use the president's clemency power to secure the release of individuals facing unduly long sentences for certain nonviolent and drug crimes. Now he should basically take every nonviolent crime, regardless of what it is, and he should basically grant them an immediate release, regardless of what it is with it. If it's what it called, I don't care what it is with, because we cannot keep doing this, and basically and let the civil cases deal with anything that's other than that. If you're not a violent criminal, you should not you should not be in prison. Stop corporations from profiting off incarceration. Uh, there's what it called there's it's really questionable on if there's a difference for between for profit and government between private and public things with it. It more comes down to when you have the pumping of the what it called the police union into government institutions to actually barter for more prisons. This is more what happens. Specifically, it happens out in California, and this is where you have people like Kamala Harris who got money from this, and that was where she was pushing for putting more people in jail. It's nice to see, even though she is the VP, it's nice to see that Biden is not listening to her when putting up this idea of how to actually handle things, provide unique needs for incarcerated women. That's currently actually being done as we speak. Ensure humane prison conditions. They actually currently have to do that. Encourage states to collect sufficient data so we can make evidence-based criminal justice policies and eliminate disparities. That's being done because California is essentially going over the data of what Kamala Harris caused a huge problem, juvenile justice. He wants to essentially he wants to incentivize states to stop incarcerating kids. Well, the problem being is that there's violent cases with that. He needs to deal with that, and the use of detention as punishment for status offenses. There's truancy, alcohol use, curfew violations. Okay, I agree with that. And this school to prison pipeline for focusing on detention. Give children a true second chance by protecting juvenile records. Well, that usually has been done with it. Very rarely, if ever, that's ever done, unless there's serious things. Offering second chances. This is one thing with it we can actually be done. They can be done. Expand access to mental health and substance abuse disorder treatment. This is something that we can actually do. Eliminate existing barriers to preventing formerly incarcerated individuals from fully participating in society. This is one of the things that's actually have as a problem, and this is why a lot of it ends up becoming a revolving door, because they can't get stuff. Reducing violence and supporting survivors of violence. The counter rise in hate crimes. Now, the problem being with the idea of hate crimes is there's also a lot of fake hate crimes, number one, because you'll have a lot of groups that are actually looking for attention. And there's also the way they figure them are not always even, and sometimes they'll actually place it as a hate crime when there is no legitimacy. It could just be basically one person going after another and then label it as a potential hate crime in the data. So there is no such thing. So what we need to do is essentially eliminate this as an actual thing and stop prosecuting by motive to try and add on time on the sentences. This is our problem. So we need to eliminate that. That's something that he should actually be thinking about, because essentially, if a black person assaults a white person or something else with it, and they get charged with a hate crime, they can actually go to jail for more time than their actual sentence should show, just because they're charging with a hate crime. And you're essentially charging them with a hate crime, or vice versa, and you're charging them with a hate crime, which essentially is adding more time on their sentence just because of one thing. reinvigorate community-based policing. This is something which is very, very, what do you call it, very, very important. He's supporting local policing, unlike Trump, who Trump is starting to push toward national policing, which is very, very bad. This is something in which which is something in which we should actually support. Now, I don't agree with his idea of pumping money into it, but the idea of basically going with the local policing over national is a great idea. Defeat the NRA. This is garbage because the NRA does not do anything with this. And he's probably going to use the terms of, yeah, he's saying ban assault weapons. First of all, the Act One Thing and high capacity magazines. First of all, these are terms that the actual Supreme Court does not recognize. That's one thing Biden needs to understand. These are actually just buzzwords for the actual politics. That's it. Reduce violence against women. Best way to do it is obviously women need to be trained and armed. That's the best way to reduce violence against women. The fact is, with it, there's nothing the government can do. Frankly, with it is we have lists of crimes that are actually out there. We have lists of uh, the idea of homicide has actually predates our actual country as an actual illegal act. And the fact is when we look at this, we need to understand is that this doesn't this we've had this on there for a long time and it doesn't matter. Support survivors of violence, community experiences of violence, and first responders by addressing the impact of trauma. And that's what it called. That can be done as a local area by having different support groups. Biden's plans for rural America. What he needs to do is we need to start. If we're going to revitalize, we need to essentially stop pumping money into farmers. Uh, he's saying trade policy that what it calls that works for American farmers. Basically, we need to eliminate tariffs because it's actually hurting farmers. That's number one. Helping on subsidies, we need to stop that. He wants to do this what it called this push on this low. I mean, he still wants to pump a lot of money into us, and this is the problem where we have this strengthening antitrust enforcement. Um, Best thing they can do is basically stop these people who are actually trying to sue when actual seed, like such as a GMO seed blows into a either standard or organic property, and what it called, and you have a company like Bayer, which owns the rights to Monsanto, wants to sue them for what it called essentially quote unquote stealing their property, even though it was merely what it called it was merely a local, it was merely a close property that bought it came over with it. That's the best thing he can do with that. Is say they do not is go to write an executive order that basically says they do not have the right to sue, and eliminate their ability to do that. And he wants to expand bio-based manufacturing. Blah 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 blah. That's more introducing with it to promote ethanol to the next generation of biofuels. He can't do that. Invest in the solar and wind. Blah 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 blah. These are things you can't do this. And his idea on green energy is not going to work. We need nuclear energy. That's the only way to work. And the fact is he needs to eliminate those barriers and get rid of all of these subsidies which hurt these people. Protect and build on the ACA to improve the quality of healthcare in rural communities. The thing about the ACA is the ACA actually harmed rural communities because the rural communities only had certain levels of doctors, and because the ACA requires a lot of paperwork, because there's a lot of government intervention over it. It actually, we've actually had many closures, and he actually notes this, that since the passage, there's actually been many closures of these doctors, and he's even noting that there's actually been many closures since 2010. That is the start of the ACA around 2010. That essentially the ACA caused this, but the fact is he doesn't admit this. He's not putting the correlation together, and this is something where we need to get rid of that, because the fact is it doesn't actually work for it. If he wants to help out rural communities, he needs to actually start advancing the way energy works, and he needs to he needs to eliminate the ACA. The ACA needs to go. We need to have large associations if we're going to work. This is something that he doesn't understand. Biden's plan for older Americans. Stand to the abuse of power by prescription drug companies with it. Frankly, the problem is we've had the government intervening, and this is what happened to the actual thing, repealing the outrageous exception, allowing drug companies to avoid negotiating with Medicare over drug prices. The fact is with it is the reason why is because the fact is their Medicare basically doesn't pay them the full amount within. The reason why is they just refuse. They can negotiate, but they're probably not going to come to an actual deal, and they're probably going to refuse, which means that they can't. Then those people that get those are not going to have access to those at all. That's the reason why that thing does with it, is that allows them to still get access to them, limiting launch prices for drugs that face no competition, that are being abusively priced by manufacturers. How about allow competition at the launch time, or only give them 1 year at the launch time? Biden understands the future of pharmaceutical innovation is not traditional chemical drugs, but specialized biotech drugs that have little or no competition to keep prices in check. What he needs to understand is the fact is that he needs to understand that allow these things 1 year and 1 year only of basically of competition free, and basically what will happen is that those prices will naturally drop out, limiting price increases for all brand biotech and abusively priced drugs to inflation. Well, the fact is then what's going to happen is they're going to start prices much higher if they're going to be limited to what government is claiming as inflation. The government is basically claiming inflation as this is much lower than it really is, which means what they're going to do to adjust for this is they're going to price it far higher than what it actually is. It's going to be well higher than that. Or what they're going to be doing is they're going to be, okay, we're going to take our losses here on the Medicare, and we're going to hit the general public. And the general public, when they buy insurance, is going to be paying far more. This is something in which we're going to be seeing. Allow consumers to buy prescriptions from other countries to create competition for the U.S. drug corporations. The Biden plan will allow consumers to import prescription drugs from other countries, allowing the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services has verified those drugs as safe. This is something in which is a positive thing. Terminating pharmaceutical corporations' tax break for advertisement spending. It doesn't matter either way with that. I mean, to me, I don't think that should be that should be, they should be able to write that off anyway. That's silly that they've been able to write that off. I think they should take that, and any money that they're doing for the luncheons and different things with doctors, those should not be allowed as write-offs. but a lot of people in the medical in the Congress do not know about that either. My mom worked in the medical community for her whole life, and she understands how that garbage goes, where they tend to try to bribe the doctors to prescribe their drugs. This comes from all your drug companies. Proving the supply of quality generics help reduce healthcare spending, but brand drug corporations have succeeded in preserving the number of strategies to help them delay the entrance in drug uh, and the generic even after the market patent has expired. Now, this is something with it in which I support. This is 100% I support because the fact is what but this actually goes to the FDA. The FDA, it's not as much them doing it directly. This is the FDA. The FDA says, well, that doesn't quite look like the other one, or it like let's say like an insulin type of thing. Well, it doesn't inject exactly like the old one, so we can't allow that to be passed. So what ends up happening is they reject it as a generic, and as a generic alternative, protect and strengthen Medicare as we know it, ensure quality, affordable health care for all older Americans. The problem being is with it is if we know about the ACA actually siphoned off of it, and not many people understand that. And that's what needs to understand with it is it preserve and strengthen Social Security. The problem being is you're not going to preserve it and do anything with it unless you actually put in a long-term path to adding in adding in money. Now, what you need to do is you need to start raising the age of people working, just ever so slightly. This is I know it's going to be uh, and this is essentially what's going to happen. Equalize saving incentives for middle class workers. Um, basically for savings plans for workers with it, what he should be doing for the retirement is eliminate all these barriers because what it does is it cuts them off. Because this is the thing with it is it does cut them off at a certain amount. Otherwise, they get expand EITC to older workers. This is going to cause more money to what it's going to cause a reduction in the amount of money that is going to be for tax revenue. While this is a nice idea, it is going to really cause that because that's essentially going to cause a problem with that. Finds plans for healthcare. That's basically what he's going to be doing. He wants the ACA, as we see in March 23rd, 2010. This is the actual time with it. As you saw, same thing. 2010 was when all these hospitals and stuff started to shut down in the rural areas. This is something in which we need to understand that this was the direct cause of the shutdown. The only way to do it is to eliminate this. While he has a couple ideas that are positive on healthcare, his ideas to essentially expand on the ACA are bad ideas. Positive things, he wants to reaffirm the ban on torture and restore greater transparency on our military operations. This is a positive thing right there, and uh, that he wants to do with it. I mean, and it will give more transparency, even if we're failing with it, so people can actually see what's going on. Um, that is a positive that I'm seeing there with it. Obviously, the rest of it is garbage. He wants Uh, he still wants to go with what he called with ideas of trying to what he called of thinking that we want to that other countries want to steal our stuff with him when frankly that's not the case. And he still wants this idea of this mixed economy, which is very, very bad with it. The idea with it is China is the fact is we've stolen more from China than China could ever steal from us. One thing right here that I consider the positive with it is I would say that right here with it is it looks like Biden has learned from his past mistakes. I haven't heard him verbally state this, but it says Biden will end the forever war in Afghanistan and the Middle East, which has causes untold blood and treasure. He has long arc, as he's long arc, Biden will bring the vast majority of our troops home from Afghanistan and narrowly focus on our mission in Al Qaeda and on ISIS as he will end our support for the Saudi-led war in Yemen, staying entrenched in unlimited wars is draining our capacity to lead on issues that require our attention, and it prevents us from rebuilding other instruments of American power. So basically, that is something in which is a very, very positive thing. Yes, he has voted for a lot of regime change in the past, but if he's learning from it now, better late than never. Um, he wants to work on diplomacy, which is a very, very big thing. He does still want to work on keeping what he called restore and reimagine partnerships with like NATO, which is garbage. But and he still wants this what it calls ironclad commitment to Israel's security, which is garbage as well. That's not a good thing. Um, and he's basically talking about the Paris Climate Accord, which basically it doesn't his he's trying to pull a fast one because he doesn't because he does not telling people that China and India do not have to do anything until 2050. Um, a lot of stuff for the what he calls for individual groups with it. So he's trying to going over individual groups. He wants to go on this idea of jumping on this idea of opioid crisis, which is holding the pharmaceutical companies and just jumping on this idea, jumping on the bandwagon, and which is still keeping up the war on drugs, which is still the problem being is that war on drugs, which is keeping it still high with it. So he still lacks the knowledge of where the stuff is coming from and what it does with it. If you reduce the actual cost, they're not going to he's not going to understand that he does these commitments to these different groups, um, and investment plans and environmental justice and the other stuff like that. Now, when we start to look at this, we can actually see that he's not really, in many cases, certain cases, it looks like he's pandering. Um, but overall, I'd say there's a couple of positive points. He has learned his stuff on foreign policy. At least some of it's good. I find what he calls that if he still wants to do a commitment to Israel, which still means us being there, is that's not good. Um, he should realize that we have no dog in the fight in the region. We should just flat out leave. Um, and that he should realize that he is going over a lot of different things as well when we're looking at this. When we start to look at the function of the our involvement in the system. So when we see that he is uh, wanting to still intervene with it, it's the same idea on his policy on criminal justice reform. He doesn't fully want to go after ending the war on drugs. It's like he wants to go part of the way, but not all the way. Because you end the war on drugs, it's going to cause that's going to cause no drugs to flow across the border, and that's something that's just very, very important. Uh, and that would end every bit of ability for this to actually happen. And that would end up occurring. If this would occur, this would end up uh, killing all those the drugs that are very, very dangerous going across the border. Because, frankly, when it comes down to the transportation is very, very expensive. And if you basically say, okay, we're going to make everything legal, the actual just by the actual forces of supply and demand, they're going to the price is going to plummet, and they can't stay up forever. And when this happens, this end up occurs. This was going to cause a reaction. This is going to cause the prices to shrink, and that to occur with that. Now, when it comes down to certain ideas, uh, he does have a certain few good ideas. I mean, every candidate, there's not going to be any candidate that's not going to come up with at least a couple of good ideas, except for Bernie Sanders. I mean, Bernie Sanders is a complete and utter nut job. People like Bernie Sanders, uh, Alexandria Ocasio Cortez, people in that idea with it, because we know that what it called that they're not really serious. That Bernie Sanders is not serious about getting out of war. He tries to state it with it, but he goes, oh, but we need to defend these countries, blah 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 blah, and he's never serious about not engaging in the war. He's Bernie Sanders is very, very serious about sanctions on Russia, which means essentially you want economic warfare against Russia. And the fact is that's essentially engaging into economic warfare. So you're actually wanting to go against war against Russia. So he is just as much of a warmonger as people like John McCain, and that's something that people need to understand. And that's where when people try to say, "Oh, he's what do you call it? He's for non-intervention." That's a bunch of garbage. Um, that's why we need to do is essentially is there's two things that we need to do as a country. I would say the number one thing is we need to get out of the wars. That's number one. Number one, we need to get out of all the wars and just send all of our people home. Get out of NATO. Send all of our people home. Get out of all of the areas that are non-active and even police actions, and send all of our people home. Get out of all of our areas of East Asia. Send all of them home with it, no matter where we are. Send all of our people home to our U.S. and its actual properties, other territories. That's all. That's number one. Number two is end the war on drugs. If you do those two things, just those two little things, you're going to notice a massive change in the way things are done. And it's also going to cause a huge change in how people react here at home. Now, when it comes to other things and other policies, is basically if you want to get people to stop coming over here illegally, and the public welfare system, let's go to a pure capitalist system and empower local charities. What's going to happen is you're going to have those prices drop. Power local charities to deal with medication for the poor as well. Those prices are going to drop as well. But even with people like that, they're a lot better than most of the Democrats. Bernie Sanders is awful. Uh, when you get people like that, that they just want to basically get to the point of bankrupting a country, and they don't even believe in any type of form of economics. When it comes down to Biden still believes in the Keynesian form of economics as it could work. The problem being is the Keynesian form of economics is this is a major downside in him, just as it is with Donald Trump, is they believe that they can use the Federal Reserve to solve all issues. And this is a problem that they both need to realize. I'll probably go into more different things with it and go into what are actually some bigger issues with it in the future of what could actually happen, but that's basically what I have right now, and I'm basically going to end it right here because we're at about like an hour 20, and that's a pretty long video, and that's about it, and see you guys later.